Okay, so we're gonna try again. I can't tell right now whether the video is up on the screen because in the Prezi, which is the software I use to show the slides, um, I am live, and then on the YouTube, I can't see the picture. So I'm just going to proceed forward because I logged out of the original scheduled live and came back in, and we've kind of the same issues. So I am just going to proceed forward and we'll see what happens. We'll see what happens. So it's been a minute since I've done one of these. Welcome. Good morning. This is the Parinama practice space. And the purpose of doing these is to create a consistent practice around Parinama. And this is a consistent practice of uniting reflex, emotion, and cognition. So it's like the movement of the body, the feelings that arise, and our beliefs and sort of rationalizations around and even our, what we perceive to be our consciousness and our thinking. So this is the thing about this practice. And I will say, so I'm Katie Bickford. I am in a kind of former to sort of current executive, and I wrote, I authored, I'd rather say, the book Parinama Method. Check out the website if you want to learn a little bit more about some of the basics around it at theparinamamethod.com. And so I come to you here. My purpose of this is to really facilitate and exemplify and talk about how the practice works and exemplify it for you. I am not trying to make money off of it, even though, yes, the book is $50. It is. I'm not going to talk about that as relative to other expenditures, but what I will say is that it is absolutely possible to do this practice without spending a penny, but it is required that you spend energy. And so you can't be passive in it. And so I'm going to talk a little bit today. We're going to be doing techniques and exercises, and I'm going to be going through the body prompts as they relate to it. And I'm going to spend a little time, since I haven't done one of these in a minute, I'm going to revisit the contextualization of like what Parinama Method is and where the actual techniques and exercises land relative to an entire practice. Now, what is it that you get out of doing Parinama? This is something that has actually impacted how I talk about it and even the rigor with which I market it, which is to not really market it at all, is that if this is calling to you, it's calling to you. And it called to me. It had me write an entire book about it. But the outcome is something that's beyond certainly was beyond my perception and conception of what's possible about how to live a life. And it's kind of like once, there's a video I'd posted on the Parinama Method Instagram about like where I actually, there was a creator that talked about like, what is it like to live in kind of a post Parinama verse? And it's kind of like living in a parallel universe where you're just watching people like really struggle in their suffering. Um, and things are easy in a very particular way. They're easy, and the capacity to deal with difficult things is like massively expanded. So even the hardship of life is experienced differently, and the sadness of life is experienced very richly but differently. This is so, and this is to say, something to say with this is that, I was working with somebody maybe a week ago who'd been an early Parinama adopter, and they'd really like kind of chewed through it. And like the idea of this being something that you can accomplish rather than it being something that is continuously unfolding and revealing deeper layers of like really the most interesting thing that's happening in your life, which is the realization of like the inner nature of what you are, your purpose, like what it feels like to be more alive, what it feels like to access greater power in terms of being able to operate in the world, build a life that's like exactly the life that you want, that is not relative to what the expectations are of other people, what other people would admire, because you stop really caring about that. But yeah, I mean, I think that probably one of the most important things about Parinama is to say like the end result is beyond comprehension in terms of the wealth that it offers, and also it is extraordinarily challenging. I mean, I heard someone say recently that cults are an easy answer. And it's like cults are proposing an easy solution for an incredibly difficult and complicated issue. And I would further to say that Parinama is a solution that legitimately um, addresses like the internal angst and sensibility of life not really making sense, and like the sadnesses of it feeling um really confusing, and a lot of the internal conflicts and relationships that exist and create a lot of drag in our lives, exhaust us, create that like block the ability to create. um so yeah, so with that said, I mean, I'm mm, I've come to the point where I am like, look, if this is something that I sort of have to exist in, sort of relative like kind of alone, um, it's like that maybe that's also how this manifests itself. I mean, the idea that like yeah, the idea about like how things work, that it's sort of relevance, or even that it like it's that like validity is validated by other people is it's a little bit kind of yeah. I'm not going to get into that, but I will. So going back to it, somebody who's chewed through it, it's like it really is about devotion. It's like the bhakti notion of like of showing up for yourself consistently, of surrendering yourself to a practice, and that means like in the absolute essence of love, that what we're doing is we are loving ourselves by every day showing up for a process and a practice that will reveal greater layers of self-actualization, self-realization, self-compassion, and ultimately self-transcendence. So the interesting thing is that the sort of path to selflessness is through what is conventionally blocked off and mislabeled as being selfish, but the interest in taking a full accountability. So I think that the non-navel gazing aspect of this is that we're taking accountability in a very particular way. It's not shamed accountability. It's sort of open-eyed, clear, visual, like seeing and feeling accountability, and being able to operate from like that point of like that like locus of control, relative to you did something wrong, so you should be punished kind of accountability, like shame on you for that, like you need to be held accountable. It's like I almost wish there was a different word, and there probably is one. But the reality is that accountability, when it is stripped of like the of chronic shaming, is this very clean feeling of reconciling things. And this is accountability with other people, but also accountability with yourself. And so this is something that has to do. So this is, I'm going to get into the body prompts here in a moment. And I'm going to do a little revisit here on what we're doing with Parinama. But this is turning into a bit more of a freestyle kind of thing, which is fine. Um, is is that basically the accountability is not just, like, with other people, it's with ourselves, and so some of the reconciling that we have to do is when we're interacting and interfacing with people, part of being in integrity is being able to hold the space that, like, we understand represents creating like the bigger picture that aligns with our values and our integrity. People with kids know this. Like it's, the thing is you don't get to just like sort of offload your emotions and how you feel and like your anger and your frustration. There's this aspect of like kind of control and restriction that is done as far as like holding boundaries and actually taking internal accountability for the things that are arising and not making other people pay the price, especially for children, where you have folks who are not really, who are like developing in their nervous system. And I'm developing, it's like it's developing and building their nervous system, so exposing them to like outsized voltage, exposing them to ideas, to shame, that are just really outmatched to what is really, like, really suitable for what the system can handle, harms it, which is a really nice dovetail into what we're gonna talk about today. So, with Parinama, as a reminder, I imagine if you're watching this, you've probably seen something before, but let's just start from the top to remember that, like, when we're talking about Parinama, we're talking about, and this is going to cover my face, so I'm going to go all the way. We're talking about the tangle. And so when we're talking about like what is our lived experience, and go to the far right box of reality, like what shapes reality, feeling of what it's like to be you every day, how you feel as you every day. um it's like, and even like your ideas of how you have to behave, or the levels of vigil, or the responsiveness to things, how you respond to things. Our reality is formed through this process, and going all the way to the left here with early events and circumstances, is that as our nervous system chronologically developing certain facets of what it feels like to be you right now. And we'll get into that in a moment. Examples: emotional capacity, feeling safe and expressing your individuality, and and your, yeah, like your integrity, feeling on your own. So those facets of our nervous system early, like they develop chronologically, and early events and circumstances shape them, because we devices to make the best of the situation that we exist in, at while the nervous system is actually sort of cooking the foundation aspect. So this forms reflexes that are really about adapting at a certain point in time. And these become subconscious responses that are just coded in. So you don't have to think about them every single time. You're actually just sort of adapting. This is the very natural aspect of what we are, adapts to the environment. And then as our cognition begins to advance, we attach that to belief systems. So we rationalize our reflexes. So if we're jumpy, it's going to be jumpy because, if your head isn't on a swivel, you'll get, taken advantage of, or you had like just even things like, um just like I can't, like, even with emotions, like the F your feelings kind of thing, where it's like, well, I can't really take on a lot of emotions, or, because that just, it's too much, or it's, like whatever rationalization, it's like emotions are, wasteful, or weak, or, sort of, yeah, just kind of ridiculous. So it's like that's a belief system around emotional capacity. Yeah, and things like being like kind of really suppressing aspects of who we are. So these belief systems, they're not wrong, like they're not like objectively incorrect. It's just that they're maladaptive, and when they like hold a fixed reaction to anything that resembles the particular aspect that it relates to. So, and that forms our reality. The reality we project into the world. And then also, not only do we project it into the world, our belief systems, we either they're either maladapted for an environment that we're in, or we seek out environments where they are not maladapted and they still fit in. So if we develop reflexes and belief systems around more what we'll call like dysfunctional early events and circumstances, and then we're trying to make ourselves fit in, then you can see where the problems will happen. So we project, or we find equilibrium for our current nervous system, and then the world responds accordingly. So it validates what we project, it reacts to, and this creates the tightening of this tangle, which validates these reflexes. So the world responds to what we're projecting, and then it's like that becomes this thing where it's like that's a validation of the reflex to begin with, which creates the mistaken notion that these are like fixed aspects of reality. Whereas with Parinama, what we're looking at is we're looking at how do we actually address how valuable this is, and that the functions that once adapted, to an early environment can still adapt. But we need to bring consciousness to them. And like here, I'm showing the corresponding aspects that still stay with us today in terms of like survival and trust and relationship with pleasure and emotion, will, autonomy, relationships, connection. But back to this thing where the malleability is where we have to consciously go in and recruit all the facets of our nervous system. Specifically, we're recruiting the cognition. So we're using this, like this conversation right now is like the thinking part of our nervous system is taking on information. But that isn't enough, because the information, I won't get into too far right now, is like a little bit, it just can't get as much of a stronghold, because there's deeper roots, which are our emotional responses and like how we feel, dictating really how we operate in the world, and then the movement and the physicality of our bodies and the reflexes that are coded into them, as far as like feelings and responses that we find. So when we're doing our Parinama practice, we're just, and it's a project, it's an ongoing devotional practice, is that we're looking at each of these facets of ourselves, and we're coming to learn what they are. We're coming to learn, and even shadows, but we learn, I mean, this is the different bundles associated with what's known as chakras, but also with the different components of the development as our nervous system. Where's the other? Here we also have this. This is probably a better one for this topic. But anyway, so what we're doing is we're recruiting all the facets of our nervous system, not just our like thinking mind. We're recruiting feeling, and we're recruiting movement. And so what we do is we learn about each of these facets. We understand the interruptions and stressors that impact it, the type, like, and just, like, it's not exhaustive, but we get into like what are some of the categories, and then we come to know what some of the adaptation patterns are, so we can kind of look to ourselves and be like, oh, it's like kind of a connecting the dots thing, because we're hitting this sort of rationalization aspect with a number of different, like in a number of different directions. And then finally, and what we're getting at today and this week, is techniques and exercises where once we have recruited our cognition, once we have recruited the feeling aspect of exploring this stuff and having emotions arise around it, then we have the techniques and exercises, which are for actually beginning to shift the feelings that we have in our body. And as a result of doing that, we find a way to reconnect with the core and the foundation of the formation of what these things feel like. So let's talk about that. So for today, for the remaining time, if you're following along in the book, page 35, 36, you have the hubs and the primary location in the body. We're going to talk about discharging, like managing the energy and the kind of stuckness around each hub this week. And we're also going to talk about the phenomenon of like integrating this practice, which is that we can like have a big feeling of winning, like or like an opening, like especially if we like look at a very particular aspect in a hub and it's very evocative and it brings back a lot of recollections and it's kind of flooding that in, and that can create an opening. Or doing a practice, a technique, an exercise can actually like create an opening. And the thing is, it's kind of like expanding an elastic, where it's like it's like everything becomes bigger. But then there's a generally what I call a recoil, which is a contraction. This is something really common. Like if you exercise, you're sore after. If you have a big disclosure to a person that's unusual for you, you might think like, oh my gosh, did I go too far? And then like once there's a recalibration where it integrates and you kind of find your elastic, it's a little bit like longer than it was to begin with. So it's not in the recoil, it's not in the extension, but it's a little bit broader. And that's the process that we go through with this. So, as like, going back to, this is not the easy road, and this is why for people interested in Parinama, I always want to make sure they've tried everything they think could possibly work. Because I mean, I think the thing is that this is really the work required to do this. If you kind of are like, look, I think the secret might actually, if I just manifest stuff better, I think I actually want to give it a couple more shots. Like, you're going to have to go through that because it's just part of the process. You need to exhaust kind of the magical thinking stuff and get to this. So, all right. So let's see. So I'm going to read a little bit. We've got like about 6 minutes. So at the end of each chapter in part 2, there's a series of techniques and exercises for both expanding the capacity of the hub and restoring its dynamism. The combination of movements with their theory and contemplation is surprisingly potent and powerful. Any implication that a person needs to be healed, fixed, or corrected is an adaptation. We are natural and beautiful, perplexingly and astonishingly able to survive and adapt in wild ways. Everything in the Parinama method offers the chance to consciously govern your life and to be more dynamic and responsive. So in the techniques and exercises section for each hub chapter, you'll find prompts that consider the physical location of the hub on the body. And in this chapter, 7 short exploration awareness prompts, practices for growing the capacity and integrity of the hub. So I'll tell you right now, personally, like how I use is that it's, this was like an early, like kind of my own direct experience with this, is that wherever there's sensation in my body, I map that back to the hub and I explore whether I think something within that topic is actually being affected. And right now I have a little discomfort in my lower back, and what that's telling me. So it's like a trust relationship that it's being restored with the body. It's like that you're now, now that you're the adult and you take care of yourself, that you will. And so part of this is that there's been some aching, some really subtle aching in my lower back, which is a signal to me that I have to do some journaling, emotional hygiene practices, which is you'll find in chapter 11 of the book. But it's like it becomes, the more you practice this, the more of like sort of an instrument that your body can become, so to help manage things. So, and it's interesting because I'm not going to get into that. Okay, so I'm going to go into a couple of these and you can follow along in the book if you're so compelled. So the locations, the first hub, and I'll pop this back up here. The first hub here is have, which is physical, relates to the physical, the feeling of our physicality, feeling of being like physically, like being able to feel physically safe. The bottoms and tops of feet, knees, legs, bum, perineum, and base of spine. Physical boundary, parameter of entire body. So Prompt. Bring attention to the soles of your feet. Are they on the ground? Bring attention to the surface of your body. Can you feel the physical presence and sense of surface of your body? Second hub, feel. Hips, pelvis, genitals, lower abdomen, lower back. Sensations on entire body includes pleasure or pain. So the prompt here is, how much mobility do you have to make hula hoop, or of pain or discomfort in your lower back? Yes. Pain in any area of your body that, despite diagnosis and treatment, does not go away. The third hub, this is the yellow one if you're following along in the picture, is do, which is abdomen, mid-back, digestion, posture. And something really to mention here is, like, as this third hub relates to power, consider the fact that there's no structure in this part of your body that holds it upright. It is literally the will of your torso. Like, when you think of, like, the musculature, and you think about, like, what it to, like, stand upright and extend your body is not something where it's like a bunch of bones that you stack up on top of each other. It is literally like muscular, like, um so, and will, really, abdomen and posture are mobile, taut, upright. Digestion and metabolism are effective and effortless. And last but not least, I'm not going to go all the way to 7, is connect chest, upper back, heart, lungs, arms, hands, and bring awareness to any tightness in your chest when taking a deep breath. Let's do that. Let's take an inhale through the nose. Hold it at the bottom for a count or two, and then exhale through the mouth like blowing out a candle. And bring awareness to any tightness in your chest. So we just said that. Pay attention to the balance between the inhale and the exhale. I want to do another inhale through the nose. And really try to, like, extend, stretch into the breath. Hold it. And then exhale through the mouth, blowing a candle. So on an exhale, extend your arms out as if asking for a hug. And on the inhale, draw them inward, placing your hands on your eyes in either direction, asking, giving. That is it for today. Okay, so I'm back in the saddle. I'm not going to be doing these for very much longer. I'm going to be shifting the genre for Parinama. So more to come on that later, but not today. So yeah, I mean, for today, like, my sort of, like, low and no cost sort of optimizations are, stay hydrated. Like, if you're not feeling great right now, like, have a nice glass of water and do a couple deep breaths. And if possible, go just stand outside for 5 minutes. And if possible, do some kind of like skin to nature contact. And this doesn't mean you take off your shoes. This can even mean you put your hands on the trunk of a tree, or you feel something, or even like pet your animal if you have one handy. So anyway, I will see you tomorrow. And until then, have a good one. Bye.